This you might recognise. It's one of these mini alarm sounders. You tend to get these with alarm hosts and similar devices like that. Now, these aren't speakers, they're just sounders. And these things are actually easy to come by. Why is this so big? Why? I mean, there's no reason for this to be this big, which is exactly the same as this. No difference between these two things whatsoever. This is 20 volts, intermittent sounder, using a piezoelectric transducer. This is exactly the same. Why is it so big? For the magic of destroying one, I can have the answer. These aren't IP68 or anything like that. You can't use these outside. But this is more or less weatherproofed. They always come in a footprint like this. I mean, there's no reason for this. I suppose it's psychosomatic. It looks impressive, maybe. But I don't want this. It's ugly. And it won't fit in the space I have for it. I have room for something of this sort of footprint. Like that. That's what I want. And all the stuff in here will quite happily fit into here. These aren't speakers, these are just piezoelectric transducers. What you have in here is 2-part shell. These come sonically welded and you have to fight your way in. It's not potted down the bottom, it's held together by one little screw in the middle. You see the back here, the cable will come straight through. That's not potted in, so there's potential for water to egress through the back of the unit. Depending on how it's mounted, water can get in here. So what we have is your power cable. These tend to run off 20 volts, maybe 24 volts, but commonly it's 20 volts for control signal. And you come in here and you get to a little board, and that's just a thing to change the voltage into an intermittent sine wave, so you can get an intermittent siren sound as opposed to one just long tone. This is what's taking up space, this board here, and it's just mounted a bit wastefully. This board sits in here, and you have a piezoelectric transducer connected to the board like this. And this sits over the top, connected to this, and there you go. What we have in here is simple. 2 components for shell. These are sonically glued to form one piece. The only space which is accessible to moisture is at the back here. But these things aren't potted in, which is why it's not entirely waterproof. This is the actual ceramic piezoelectric transducer. But that's the thing that makes the noise. Just that. It's this flat thing here. And the rest of this, that's just driving it. I want this to be the form factor of this. So I'm dismantling this and making it into this. It's not a continuous sounder, it's intermittent sounder, so you need a driver. This takes 20 volts from the host, whatever it may happen to be, and this little circuit board here, all it does is just create an intermittent voltage, and this just cycles between 12 and 24 volts and back again to make the intermittent siren noise we're more familiar with. So that is why this is so big, because it has to house this circuit board, and it has got a little capacitor on there, and it takes up space. But all of this will quite happily fit into a form factor like that. So this will just quite happily sit into here like that, and we're all good. I could just put this little tiny thing into this box here and be done, but this has already got weatherproofing on it. It's already got potting around the terminals, and it's already got a nice plastic plate which you can sonically glue created by the seal. Now, I'll show you here. Trusty file. So this can be flush mounted and there'll be a little tiny indentation where this cable can come out. So what's going to happen is that's going to come out the bottom, which will be here, like that. So there'll be no water ingress whatsoever. Here is one of my pest repellers, which magically, mysteriously malfunctioned while I was working on it, because someone threw a bucket of water over me. Long story. In fact, 3 buckets of water. Anyway, nothing works on here apart from the alarm signal. This will output 20 volts DC into a little oscillator here. When I turn it on, you can hear an alarm noise, and that's actually created between the primary and secondary windings of the transformer. So, let's see if we can get a signal out of this. So you can hear there the noise. This is going to be awkward. Let's see if I can get that on the pad. Here we go. Right, that should do it. Do this quickly. I don't think this test rig here has long to live. This energizer got flooded with water when someone threw a bucket of water over me when I was working on it. Wouldn't recommend it. Okay, let's see if I can get a signal out of this thing. Right. Let's see if I can find a pad here. Must be about there. No, oh, there we go. That's it. Could be it. I mean, really, you should be getting a square wave out of this, but I doubt we're getting anywhere close to a stable voltage out of this thing right now. Come on, I feel about right. No. Come on, must be about there. No, I'm not getting anything from this. Was it no signal, was it? What's happening here? It's a bad connection. Sure one now. No, wait a minute. Wait a minute. Oh, wait a minute. That. Okay. That feels weird. Okay, so what we got here? Okay, that's the wrong voltage level. No, I'm not getting anything anywhere near stable like this. Okay. Get on that pad. Yeah. Alright, let's see if I can. Just a time base a bit here. Okay, can I get a good signal? Well, that's a bit better. we go. It's about as best as we're going to get that signal. Okay, it's not a great signal, but I'd be surprised if this is actually outputting exactly 20 volts right now. It's failing miserably. Okay, let's try and... What's a bit better? There we go. There we go. That's a better signal. It's trying to get a square wave, but it's not going to make it. This is never going to be a square wave. We look at the duty cycle there. We lost it. I lost a pin. Let's try this again. Should be getting a signal out of this. Why am I not getting a signal out of this? Maybe I'm off my ground pad there. Let's try this again. Right, it should be back there. Come on. Come on. Oh, here we go. Here we go. What the hell's going on there? Right, get these bits from solder. Okay, look at this. That's not a good signal. Okay. So I can zoom in a bit here. Slow down the time base. Can I go any slower? No, I think that's all I can get. Nope. Oh, there we go. Come on. I think that's to fit some solder. Yeah, I think we've got a cold weld here. Okay, it's consistent, I think. I think it's trying to be a square wave, but we don't give you a space to take out your wiring. You have to do that yourself. Now, normally they expect you to, drill a hole through the back, or maybe from the side, or for the bottom. Normally, for the bottom is the best place to do it because you get a bit more protection from the elements. You just do yourself a little weather loop so the water doesn't drain in, just because the bottom falls. Now, here's what I've done. I've drilled a hole right there. And my cable is going in and then backwards out the cavity, and then I'm going to create myself a little notch with my trusty file. I have already sanded my little project box to get all of the dirt and grime or any surface residue left over, and most importantly to get the film off the plastic so my spray paint can adhere better to the surface, so it won't just flake off. So this now will get spray painted. The bottom bit is going to be red. This top bit is going to be yellow. So we get a nice contrast with this little red bit which will go on the top. This is going to be mounted inside slightly. Right. This is where we do the spray painting. You could hang these things up, and you really should hang them up because you get a better view. You can get everything from different angles, as you really should do with spray painting. Getting even coverage from all the different angles is often tricky, especially if the item is stationary. It's easy if you do it on wires, but it doesn't work for me, so. We've had one undercoat, we've had 2 coats of colour, and we've had 2 gloss coats over the top for protection. So here's our project box. It's had its first spray painting. This top bit's going to get another few coats. That's looking quite good for now. We have this little thing here. This came from the original mini sounder. This will end up being recessed by about the depth of the plastic. So the problem we now have is we need to drill 3 precise holes to correspond with these legs into this. There are many ways in which you could do this. You could measure it very carefully and drill holes and hope for the best, but I have a different way. Okay, here is the bottom of my project box. It's been painted nicely. Here is the top. This little unit that came from the original sounder, I'm going to combine with this. So we need to make 3 holes in here to correspond to the 3 legs on here. What you could do is measure this. Nah, not doing that. What you could also do is just get some nail varnish like this and paint the edge of this, and then you mate it onto here. You leave it for a few seconds and you get a perfect mark for where you want to put it. And that will work with most things, but some things you want a really precise central point from when you drill. And this is quite a big area and you might miss. And that'll give you a headache later on. So here's what we're going to do. Here is some unused 1.5 CPC from a wiring project. I know using my talking calipers here that this leg is exactly 5mm deep, so I've set my calipers to 15mm deep, and I can use this to now mark off 15mm increments, which I can then cut with my wire snips. So we just align that on there to where we get to. There you go, that's that. So here we now have our 3 little bits of wire. These will be our pointers. We're now going to wrap a bit of masking tape around the end so they fit very snugly into the little spaces provided for us here. What we have here are 3 little pointers. Just need the tips visible, so you don't have to be too accurate about this. But you just want these to sit snugly inside of these little holes, so when you turn it over they don't fall out. Yeah, this may seem like a faff, but it's just preferable to measuring and getting it wrong by even 0.5 millimeter. So now what we do is get a little pointer and you just poke that into a little hole here, like so. These will just find their own levels. So now you just press it down onto the surface, but it'll just find their own level and bring it down. And now what we do is use the nail varnish. The hardest bit now is making sure that we centre this first time. This is where you probably should measure it, but I'm not going to. Now, you know where your centre points are because there's a ridge at the top. Now, I'm looking at about, let's do that there, okay, so here we go. So just pressing this in, that's going to stab into the new paintwork, and then it will leave an impression in one point only. So when we do our starting points with the centre punch, hopefully, if we're very lucky, let's see what happens. Yeah, there we go. Now we have 3 visible points. So now we know where to punch. Again, many ways to do this. Don't drill straight into a really prepared surface because the drill may wander and then you ruin everything. So here what I have is an 8mm bit here. It's got a nice sharp point, and what we're going to do is use this as a centre point. You can find it. The point about what we just did is there's now a point in here which is indentated, and I can feel it. There we go. So now I've found my centre point. Now, what you should be using here is a mallet. I haven't got one, but I have a drill. Try and be as straight as possible. There we go. Okay. Where is this? There we are. So if you can see what we're doing, you don't need to do any of this. So we've now got our firm points. Our drill can sit in and the drill will not wander. What we need is a drill piece which is close to the diameter of the legs that you have. Okay. Right, we've got some basic holes in our piece here. Now, I'm just using my 8mm drill bit here, going in for the back, just clearing out any of the spoil from the other side of the hole. I'm doing it this side because I can't accidentally scratch the surface on the other side. Ideally what you would do is not spray paint the surface to start with before you finish this, but I need high contrast. So yeah, so we need to finish cleaning up the hole. Got some wet and dry. This is now in the hole. There you go. That will just clean up the inside of the hole there. Okay, if you need to unclog your sandpaper, so you need some water. Just twist it a little bit. We'll just make a nice point. So you can just shove this in like that. And then nice clean holes. Here is the top of my project box now finished with the original component now recessed, which is the depth of the top here, which is about 5mm. Now, if I get the spirit level, you might find it's more or less level. So you may wonder why I haven't put a hole for the sounder to allow sound through. That's intentional. I want a quieter alarm than these things are normally intended, so I want to keep most of the sound in. The sound can still escape through the other air gaps which are left for ventilation and condensation. Okay. Here is my surface mounted components. Here is my cable, strain relief. Now, if you're lucky, what you'll find is the original screw hole will align to one of the holes in the bottom of the project box which they provide you. So you get a standoff. Now in this case it's not quite perfect. Bit of experimentation. What you'll find is a bean orientation where it almost fits. In my project box you see the hole originally provided with a screw almost aligns with one of the mounting points, but not quite. It's not quite perfect. So you have two choices normally. You can just forget about it completely, pot it in perhaps. What you can sometimes do is sand down the edges with this contact and make a bit of space. That's what I'll be doing now. What I have here is a little rasp. I'm going to use this just to rasp down the sides of this board, because there's a little bit of contact here. Just need to get rid of not even a millimetre. Just want to get rid of this. You have to be careful because on these boards the traces might go around the outside, like this one does. But you don't need to take very much off, just a little bit off the side here, where there's contact, because there's always about 0.5 millimetre you can take off safely, and that's what we're doing here. As you can see, there's a little bit of space on the board where you can file away any excess. So all I'm doing is using my finger as a guide to make sure I don't go too deep, and just filing off the excess around the components of the traces at the edge of the board. You don't need much to make enough space. We're only short by maybe even not even 0.5 millimetre. So we're just taking off bits where there's contact. You see here. Compare that to this edge here with that edge there. See, that's all we need to do. Okay, almost done now. Just putting in the weather seal. Now, 2 things to note about these seals. They work better if you stretch them ever so slightly, because they contract and they're more likely to fit into a little trough. And go around with your thumb behind it, like that, and you just pull ever so gently and let it just fall into the trough. And go around with your thumb like this, and what you'll find is when you get to the end, there'll always be a bit left over. And that's fine, doesn't matter, because these things are cookie cut off an assembly line, and they always give you a bit too much rather than not enough. So I've got myself around back to the beginning, and what you'll see is as you go round, as you stretch this, and then you'll just want to just fall into the trough. So you guide it round with your thumb, like that. And you'll see here, you'll get back to where you started from. There'll be some left over. Doesn't matter. Chop it off like that. And you can reuse this. And there is your seal. So that's that done. Now what you'll see here, it doesn't quite fit. All you've got to do is just guide it back with your fingernail. Just guide it back around here, and it will fit. There you go, see. There we go, that's now in. Just press it in with a fingernail or bone fold or screwdriver, flathead screwdriver. Just poke one in. Poke, poke, poke. Poke, poke, poke. Just press into the trough. This will be compressed by the other half of the clamshell, but this will just help it stay where it wants to be. Stop it just wanting to fly out like it might want to do. Here is the transducer plate here. Now you want this to be inside here. You could do many things here. I like to use this stuff. This is PVC cement. This is basically a solvent. If you get this near wiring, it will dissolve the insulator and then it'll be arcing and you'll have a bad day. Maybe a fire. But you just get a little bit of this. Just paint around the inside of here. Because what this will do, this will fuse plastic here, which I've already given you, with the plastic of the other half of the shell, like so. Just dab a little bit here, dab a little bit there. Stay away from the wiring. Stay away from the wiring. The conductor will be fine. The insulator will melt when you have two large wires next to each other. That won't be good. This stuff takes about 30 seconds to work, thereabouts. Just stay away from the conductors. Wipe off the excess, and this will cause the plastic which has already been fused to the exterior of the ceramic plate here to become one with the actual other half of the shell. It will create a nice weather seal. Not that we need it because we're not making a hole through this, but if you were making a hole through this, you would want a weather seal, and this will make a very good weather seal if you were doing that. So you have to hold this for about 30 seconds while it does its thing, and then you'll have a weld. We now have the weather seal in place around the shell here. The transducer is now welded to the top of the casing. Now we just need to join everything together. Now what I like to do is I put a little bit of Loctite on the end of these screws. For no reason other than to prevent people tampering. And you could also use security screws. I don't have any security screws, so I just use a bit of Loctite. Or you could use super glue or anything like that. Of course, when you do things like this, you back off the screw just to make sure it seats properly. That way you won't cross thread it. Always back off your screws. Just half a turn will do. Now, you don't want to hammer down on these too far. You go around in circles, just tightening each one by one, and you can feel when it bites. Go around in circles like this. Don't do one by itself, otherwise there'll be too much pressure, then you might create an uneven joint somewhere, then you might have water ingress. So you just go around in circles, tightening a little bit more as you go, and eventually they'll all get to a point when they're finger tight, and that'll be fine because I've got Loctite on here